They thought an 83-year-old woman wouldn't notice when her own children started playing mind games with her. They thought wrong. My name is Beatrice, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had raised honest children. I've lived in this house for 42 years. I balanced my own checkbook, managed my late husband's estate, and never missed a doctor's appointment or forgot to pay a bill. I was a high school mathematics teacher for 37 years. I taught calculus to teenagers who thought they could outsmart me. I managed a household budget through 3 recessions. When my husband Charles died 5 years ago, I handled all the estate paperwork, insurance claims, and financial transitions by myself. I've never been a woman who could be easily fooled. But suddenly everyone seemed concerned about my memory. It started about 6 months after I'd mentioned to David that I was considering donating some money to the local animal shelter. Money that was rightfully mine to give. That's when the subtle comments began. "Mom, you missed your dentist appointment yesterday," my son David would say, shaking his head with that new tone he'd started using, like I was a child. "I never had a dentist appointment yesterday, David." "Mom, I reminded you twice. Maybe you should write things down." The thing is, I've always written things down. My calendar has been my Bible for decades. I color-coded my appointments. Blue for medical, green for social, red for important deadlines. I had systems that had worked flawlessly for 40 years. But suddenly appointments I'd never made were appearing in conversations, and items I'd carefully placed were somehow misplaced. What bothered me most was how they spoke about me when they thought I couldn't hear. During family gatherings, I'd catch whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room. Susan would give me those pitying looks, the kind you give someone you feel sorry for. David would speak slowly and loudly, as if I were hard of hearing, which I'm not. The most insidious part was how they began rewriting our family history. David started telling stories about incidents that never happened, claiming I'd been forgetful for years. Susan would nod along, adding details to events I knew were fabricated. "Remember when Mom forgot to turn off the stove and almost burned down the kitchen?" David would say at dinner, and Susan would gasp dramatically. But I'd never left a stove on in my life. I'm obsessively careful about kitchen safety, always have been. Yet there they were, creating false memories, building a narrative of incompetence that simply didn't exist. It started small. My reading glasses would go missing from the kitchen counter where I always left them. My daughter Susan would find them in the refrigerator. "Oh, Mom, you really need to be more careful. This is how it starts, you know." How what starts? I wanted to ask, but something in her tone made me swallow the words. Then my checkbook disappeared from my desk drawer, the same drawer I'd used for 20 years. It turned up in the linen closet. "I think you're getting confused about where you put things," David said when I called him, frustrated. "Maybe it's time we talked about getting you some help around the house." But I wasn't confused. I started keeping track. Every missing item, every forgotten appointment, every condescending comment about my memory. I wrote it all down in a journal I hid in my bedroom. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every memory lapse they pointed out conveniently supported the same narrative. Mom can't take care of herself anymore. Mom needs help managing her finances. Mom shouldn't be living alone in this big house. My house. The house I'd paid off with my own money. The manipulation escalated. Susan started calling me 3 times a day, asking if I'd taken my medications. When I said yes, she'd sigh dramatically. "Mom, you told me yesterday you forgot to take them. Are you sure you're remembering correctly?" But I had a pill organizer. I'd been using the same system for 15 years. I knew exactly what I'd taken and when. David began showing up unannounced, claiming I'd invited him for dinner when I hadn't. He'd stand in my kitchen, shaking his head sadly as he helped me prepare food I hadn't planned to make. "You called me this morning, Mom. You were crying, saying you were so lonely and couldn't remember how to make Dad's meatloaf recipe." I never cried to David. I'd made my husband's meatloaf hundreds of times from memory. But there he was, taking over my kitchen, treating me like a confused child. The financial pressure began subtly. Susan would visit and casually mention bills that were overdue, bills I'd already paid. She'd pull out her laptop and insist on helping me check my online banking. "See, Mom? This electric bill is past due. You're getting overwhelmed keeping track of everything." But when I checked later, the bill had been paid weeks ago. I started printing out all my bank statements and filing them meticulously. Every payment, every transaction, perfectly documented. They began involving other people in their narrative. Susan called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, expressing concern about my well-being. "I just worry about Mom living alone," she said, loud, enough for me to hear through the kitchen window. "She's been so forgetful lately. Yesterday she couldn't remember where she put her car keys." But I knew exactly where my keys were. On the hook by the door where they'd hung for 40 years. I'd heard the conversation and immediately checked. There they were, exactly where I always left them. The most devastating incident happened on a Wednesday afternoon. I came home from grocery shopping to find David in my living room with a man in a suit. "Mom, this is Mr. Peterson from Sunset Manor. I asked him to come by and show you some brochures about their assisted living community." "I don't need assisted living," I said firmly. Mr. Peterson smiled that practiced smile all salespeople use. "Mrs. Beatrice, your son tells me you've been having some challenges managing daily tasks. Our facility is designed to help people maintain their independence while providing the support they need." I looked at David, who avoided my eyes. "You had no right to invite this man into my home without asking me." "Mom, we're just exploring options. You don't have to decide anything today." But the message was clear. They were already shopping for places to put me away. After Mr. Peterson left, David sat me down for what he called a family meeting. "Mom, Susan and I have been talking. We think it might be time to consider having someone help you manage your finances. Just the big stuff. Bills, investments, that sort of thing." I've been managing my finances just fine for 83 years. But, Mom, you've made some mistakes lately. Remember the electric bill? And yesterday you told Susan you couldn't find your insurance papers. "I never said that to Susan. My insurance papers are in the file cabinet where they've always been." David shook his head sadly. "Mom, you're forgetting conversations. It's okay. It happens to everyone as they get older. We just want to help." The gaslighting was so subtle, so persistent, that I began to question myself. Late at night, I'd lie, in bed wondering, did I really forget that appointment? Did I actually put my glasses in the refrigerator? Was I losing my mind? That's exactly what they wanted. The doubt, the second-guessing, the slow erosion of my confidence in my own memories and abilities. The worst part was how they made me feel guilty for resisting their help. When I insisted, I was fine. They'd exchange meaningful looks that said, "See how defensive she gets? That's another sign." Susan started bringing her teenage daughter, my granddaughter Emma, to visit more often. But instead of normal grandmother-granddaughter time, these visits felt like performances. "Tell Grandma about your college applications, Emma," Susan would say, then turn to me with exaggerated patience. "Mom, Emma is applying to college next year. We talked about this last week, remember?" Emma would look uncomfortable as I insisted. I remembered our conversation perfectly, but Susan would just smile and say, "It's okay, Mom. Sometimes details slip through the cracks." They were using my own granddaughter to reinforce their narrative of my supposed decline. The final straw in this phase came when I discovered David had been calling my bank, claiming to be concerned about unusual account activity. "Mrs. Beatrice," the bank manager, Mr. Williams, called to tell me, "your son contacted us about some concerns regarding your account management. He suggested we flag any large transactions for additional verification." "What kind of concerns?" "He mentioned you've been forgetful lately and might be vulnerable to scams or poor financial decisions." I felt my cheeks burn with rage and humiliation. My own son had gone behind my back to my bank, painting me as an incompetent old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own money. "Mr. Williams, there is nothing wrong with my mental capacity, and I do not authorize my son to have any information about or influence over my accounts." "Of course, Mrs. Beatrice. I just wanted you to be aware of the inquiry." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my journal, documenting every incident, every manipulation, every lie. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't love or concern. This was a calculated campaign to undermine my competency, and I was going to prove it. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening. David and Susan were in my kitchen, and I was coming back from the bathroom when I heard Susan's voice. "The house is worth at least $400,000 now. And her savings account—" "Shh, keep your voice down," David interrupted. "We just need to be patient. A few more months of this and we can convince her, or a judge, that she needs a conservatorship." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. "I still feel bad about moving her things," Susan whispered. "It's for her own good," David replied. "She'll thank us later when she's in a nice facility and we're managing her affairs properly." Facility, conservatorship, managing my affairs. Everything clicked into place. The gaslighting, the manufactured confusion, the systematic undermining of my confidence. It was all calculated. My own children were trying to steal my life from me, piece by piece. I stayed in that hallway for another 10 minutes, listening to them plan my future. They discussed which assisted living facilities had the shortest waiting lists. They debated whether to sell my house immediately or rent it out for passive income. Susan worried about my jewelry, specifically my grandmother's diamond ring, that she'd always coveted. "Once we get conservatorship, we can make all those decisions," David said coldly. "The court will trust us to act in her best interests." "What about the money she mentioned donating to that animal shelter?" Susan asked. "That's exactly the kind of poor decision-making that proves she's not competent," David replied. "No judge will let someone with dementia give away thousands of dollars to charity." But I wasn't giving away thousands. It was a modest donation. Well, within my means. They were twisting my generosity into evidence of incompetence. "I've been researching conservatorship laws," Susan continued. "We need medical documentation of cognitive decline. Dr. Rodriguez has known her too long. He might not cooperate. But that new doctor, Dr. Mitchell, might be more understanding of the situation." My blood ran cold. They were planning to doctor shop until they found someone who would support their narrative. "The bank inquiry was smart," David said. "It creates a paper trail of financial concerns. And Emma's college fund." "What about Emma's college fund?" Susan asked sharply. "Well, if Mom's declared incompetent, we could redirect some of her assets to ensure Emma's education is secure. It's what Mom would want. But I'd already planned to help with Emma's college expenses. This wasn't about what I wanted. This was about what they wanted. and they were willing to lie, manipulate, and steal to get it. When they finally left, I sat in my living room for hours, staring at the walls of the home I'd built with my late husband. 42 years of memories, and they wanted to erase it all for money. But I wasn't going down without a fight. The next morning, I began my counteroffensive. First, I called Dr. Rodriguez, not the new doctor David had been pushing, but my physician of 15 years. I need a comprehensive cognitive assessment, I told him. And I need it documented officially. Beatrice, you seem as sharp as ever. To me. Is everything all right? No, I said quietly. But it will be. Dr. Rodriguez ran every test in the book. Memory, reasoning, decision-making capacity, executive function. I scored in the 95th percentile for my age group. Your mind is as sharp as a woman 20 years younger, he told me, signing the official assessment. In fact, your cognitive function is better than most people half your age. Is someone questioning your competency? My children think I'm losing my mind. I needed to prove I wasn't. His face darkened. Beatrice, what you're describing sounds like elder abuse. Have you considered speaking with an attorney? That's my next stop. I spent the afternoon researching elder law attorneys online. I found Sarah Chen, whose website specifically mentioned financial abuse, conservatorship disputes, and gaslighting tactics used against seniors. I called her office immediately. Mrs. Beatrice, Sarah said when I explained my situation. I see cases like this more often than I'd like to admit. What you're describing is called financial abuse through psychological manipulation. It's insidious, it's calculated, and it's completely illegal. I showed her my documentation, my medical assessment, my journal of incidents, printed bank statements proving my financial competence, even recordings I'd made of some of our conversations on my phone. You've been remarkably thorough, Sarah said, impressed. Most victims of this type of abuse don't think to document everything. You have a very strong case. What are my options? We can take several proactive steps. First, we'll establish a revocable trust with you as the primary trustee, making it much harder for anyone to claim you're not competent to manage your affairs. Second, we'll update your will and healthcare directives. Third, we'll add fraud, alerts to all your financial accounts, and specify exactly who is and isn't authorized to receive information about them. Over the next week, Sarah and I worked together to bulletproof my legal and financial situation. We documented everything. The pattern of manipulation, the overheard conversation about conservatorship, my excellent cognitive assessment results. The beauty of this approach, Sarah explained, is that you're not just defending yourself, you're taking control. When they make their move, you'll be ready. We also prepared what Sarah called the nuclear option, a detailed report to Adult Protective Services documenting the financial and psychological abuse, complete with evidence and witness statements from Dr. Rodriguez and the bank manager about David's unauthorized inquiries. Hopefully we won't need to use this, Sarah said. But if they escalate, we can file formal elder abuse charges. I felt more empowered than I had in months. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't playing defense. I was taking control of my own life again. The confrontation came sooner than expected. 2 weeks later, David showed up with papers, and Susan brought a man I didn't recognize. Mom, this is Mr. Harrison. He's a social worker who specializes in helping seniors transition to more appropriate living situations. Mr. Harrison smiled, condescendingly. Mrs. Beatrice, your children are concerned about your ability to live independently. We'd like to discuss some options that might be better for your safety and well-being. Susan pulled out a folder thick with brochures. We've found some lovely facilities, Mom. Places where you wouldn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning or managing bills. Mom, Susan and I have been talking to a lawyer," David added, pulling out documents. "We think it would be best if we helped manage your finances. Just temporarily, until you're feeling more like yourself." I looked at the power of attorney documents he'd prepared. They were thorough, granting them complete control over my bank accounts, investments, healthcare decisions, and even the right to sell my house. "We've also scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mitchell for a competency evaluation," Susan added. "He's more experienced with age-related cognitive issues." That was my cue. I smiled calmly and stood up. "That won't be necessary, David." I walked to my china cabinet and pulled out the folder Sarah and I had prepared. "I've been evaluated by Dr. Rodriguez. My cognitive function is excellent. I've also consulted with an attorney about what you and Susan have been doing." David's face went pale. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about moving my belongings to make me think I'm forgetful. I'm talking about your conversation last Tuesday about conservatorships and facilities and managing my affairs." I spread my evidence across the dining room table. The cognitive assessment showing my excellent mental capacity, bank statements proving my financial competence, a detailed log of their manipulation tactics, and even audio recordings I'd made of some of our conversations. Mr. Harrison looked confused. "Mrs. Beatrice, your children indicated you were experiencing significant memory issues and poor judgment. My children lied to you," I said firmly, handing him a copy of my cognitive assessment. "As you can see, my mental capacity is excellent. They've been systematically manipulating me to create the appearance of incompetency." I turned to David and Susan. "I know about your plan to get conservatorship. I know you've been doctor shopping for someone who would declare me incompetent. I know you contacted my bank behind my back. And I know you've been using Emma to reinforce your lies about my supposed memory problems." Susan started crying. "Mom, we just want what's best." "What's best for you, you mean?" I interrupted. "I heard you discussing how to divide my assets. My house, my savings, even my jewelry. You weren't trying to help me. You were trying to steal from me." I slid a formal document across the table. "This is a cease and desist letter from my attorney, Sarah Chen. If either of you attempts to manipulate me again, questions my competency without cause, or tries to interfere with my financial or medical decisions, you'll face legal consequences for elder abuse." David picked up the letter with shaking hands, his face growing paler as he read. "Mom, you don't understand. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me from what? My own money? My own home? My own decisions?" I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "You wanted my house and my money, and you thought you could convince me I was too old and confused to stop you." I turned to Mr. Harrison, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I assume you'll need to file a report about this situation." "Mrs. Beatrice, there seems to have been a significant misunderstanding. I was told you were experiencing severe cognitive decline and couldn't care for yourself. If what you're saying is true..." "It's all documented," I said, gesturing to the evidence. "My attorney has copies of everything, including recordings of conversations where my children discussed their plans to gain control of my assets." Susan was sobbing now. "Mom, I'm sorry. We just thought, with Dad gone, and you getting older." "I'm 83, not dead," I said coldly. "And my husband's death doesn't make me incompetent. It makes me a widow, not an invalid." David tried. One last manipulation. "Mom, even if you're right about some things, don't you think having help would be easier? You don't have to manage everything alone." "I don't want to manage everything alone, but I want to choose my own help. not have it forced on me through lies and manipulation. There's a difference between support and control. I pulled out another document. I've already made arrangements. I've hired a housekeeper to come twice a week. I've arranged for grocery delivery. I've set up automatic bill pay for my utilities. And I've established a trust with Sarah Chen's firm to ensure my affairs are properly managed if I ever do become incapacitated. But, Mom, David started. But nothing. I've taken control of my own life again. The difference is, I'm doing it, honestly, with professional help I trust, not through family members who lie to me. Mr. Harrison gathered his papers awkwardly. I think it's clear there's been a serious misunderstanding. Mrs. Beatrice, based on what I've seen today, you're clearly capable of making your own decisions. I'll need to file a report about the false information I was given. After they all left, I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the evidence of my victory. My phone rang. It was Sarah. "How did it go?" she asked. "Better than expected," I said. "They came with papers and a social worker, just like you predicted. But they left with nothing except a cease and desist order." "How do you feel?" "Free," I said. "For the first time in months, I feel free. And vindicated. And maybe a little sad that it came to this." "The sad part is normal," Sarah said gently. "You're grieving the children you thought you had versus the ones you actually have. That's a real loss." She was right. Part of me would always mourn the relationship I thought I had with David and Susan. But I was proud that I'd trusted my instincts and fought back. "There's one more thing," Sarah said. "Mr. Harrison called my office. He's filing a report with Adult Protective Services about the false information he was given. David and Susan may face formal investigation for attempted financial abuse." Felt a grim satisfaction. Actions had consequences, and maybe this would prevent them from trying this with someone else's vulnerable parent. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you live your life on your own terms," Sarah said. "You've proven you can take care of yourself, legally and practically. The rest is up to you." And established a revocable trust. Attorney Chen has all the documentation. Slid a document across the table. "This is a cease and desist letter. If either of you attempts to manipulate me again, or questions my competency without cause, you'll face legal consequences for elder abuse." David picked up the letter with shaking hands. "Mom, you don't understand. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me from what? My own money? My own home? My own decisions?" I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "You wanted my house and my money, and you thought you could convince me I was too old and confused to stop you." Mr. Harrison gathered his papers awkwardly. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was told Mrs. Beatrice was experiencing severe cognitive decline." "You were lied to," I said calmly. "My children have been engaged in a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation designed to make me appear incompetent. Fortunately, I documented everything." After they left, I called Sarah Chen. "It's done," I told her. "They came with papers and a social worker, just like you predicted." "How do you feel?" she asked. "Free," I said. "For the first time in months, I feel free. They left that day, and I haven't heard from them since. Part of me grieves for the children I thought I'd raised. But a bigger part of me is proud that I trusted my instincts." The social worker, Mr. Harrison, called me the next day to apologize. He'd been completely misled about my situation, and had never encountered such a clear case of attempted financial manipulation disguised as family concern. Dr. Rodriguez referred me to a support group for elder abuse survivors. I learned I wasn't alone. This type of manipulation is shockingly common, especially when there's significant money or property involved. If you're an older adult and people around you are constantly questioning your memory, your decisions, your ability to care for yourself, pay attention, document everything, trust your gut, get professional assessments if you need them. Your age doesn't make you vulnerable. Your silence does. The most insidious part of this type of abuse is how it makes you complicit in your own diminishment. They convince you that you're the problem, that you're failing, that you need their help. But help that comes with strings attached isn't help. It's control. I'm still in my house. I'm still managing my own affairs. And my mind is just as sharp as it ever was. Maybe sharper, because now I know who I can't trust. Don't let anyone steal your life from you. One forgotten appointment at a time. You're stronger than they think you are. And more importantly, you're stronger than they want you to believe you are. Share your story below. You're not alone, and you're not losing. Your mind.